All right, take us away.
Good luck.
Okay, I've been nominated and or volunteered, I guess, to help facilitate today's goal setting discussion for the dev group. We're going to, as we just did in our recent outreach meeting, try to structure this a little bit more and hopefully engage as many people on the call as possible. So we are taping this. I should make that disclaimer too. This is being videotaped on YouTube. So if anything you say or your appearance will be recorded. If you want to mute or turn off your camera, do that. I don't think the raising hands things worked so good in the last meeting, but we could try to do that. Although it's not required, but do try. One of the things we want to do in this meeting is give everybody a chance to talk and to get ideas out there and not sort of get into the pros and cons, at least right away. We'll have time for that later. So let's start out with just going around the room and have everybody do a quick introduction, sort of who they are and what they hope to get out of this meeting. Gregory, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Greg. Currently logged in here, joining from Australia. I do not have any, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, any professional sort of like goals out of Backdrop. I do that as a hobby and because I love the community. My personal goals when it comes to Backdrop is to do my best to help build a product that is as less annoying, frustrating, and as easy to use as it can be, so that people being onboarded to the project find it fun to work with. You can say I'm a UX and UI enthusiast. And what I expect to get out of this meeting is just brainstorm with my fellow Backdroppers on how we can sort of like improve the Backdrop product itself, and the way perhaps that we work on it in the issue queue as developers.
I'm just going to the Brady Bunch style. And for me at least, that's Nate. You're next.
So yeah, I'm Nate. I'm one of the founders of Backdrop and core committer. And for 2020, what I'd like to see is, I mean, I'm always trying to do this, but I'd like to see more of it to reduce waste. Like, we have an enormous amount of contributors, an enormous amount of discussions, and a lot of things get started, and a lot of things get really far along, actually, but sometimes run into a roadblock here or there, whether it's authority or login access or decision-making process. Try to reduce as much of that friction as possible and make it so that we're not wasting the valuable time of our contributors.
Jeff, how about you? Jason, you're on deck.
Yeah, I've been concerned with waste recently too, and I know we've heard echoes of that in our chat channels. So I was hoping to streamline the developer experience, the contributor experience, to a place where they have they're empowered to go get a thing, and they can figure out which things are going to take them an hour on a Sunday and which things are going to be 3 months of their lives. And particularly on the other end of that hour or 3 months, that doesn't go up to be 6 months or a year, or from an hour to a month, because that creates frustration. So yeah, I was hoping to reduce that waste and come up with a process that we can help prioritize and get things to the finish line.
So I started to take notes. My keyboard's working crappy today. I'm hoping other people can help. Jason, do you have anything to add, or what do you have? What are you looking for today?
I think the biggest reason I'm here today is just to be available, to be part of the conversation. But I guess I could add, I have a slight focus, even though I'm a back-end developer, not a front-end developer. I think user experience is probably the thing that I do the most to try to help with when I see something that looks like a problem in workflow or something like that, usually in forms, I try to see if I can help fix things like that, make it easier for the end user. So that's probably the area that I would think I would be more focused on. But mostly I'm just here to participate in the conversation.
Okay, fair enough. Matthias, you're next. Any comments? And Joseph, you're on deck. And
Okay, I'm just a listener to the meeting. I'm not a developer. I'm a web designer slash copywriter from Switzerland, using Backdrop for maybe 10 projects right now, and I try to listen.
just for context, Matthias, have you been involved in the issue queue or used it at all very much?
No.
No? Okay. Joseph? If Jen's here, she's on deck.
So I'm a backend developer. I do mostly Drupal 7 work for like my job, but I don't know, I try to help out where I can with that because I'd like to be able to move to Drupal 7, or I mean, not Backdrop. Yeah, and I guess I'm just here in this meeting because I want to participate. So.
Go ahead, Jen.
So I was looking forward to figuring out initiatives and goals for the next release, but I realized that that may be too fine grain of focus for this meeting. So I'm just now curious about where it's going to go and what we are going to do. So.
Okay, Justin.
Oh, well, hi. I just hang out looking for opportunities to help improve the infrastructure. We just provide some infrastructure support periodically. Opinions.
Anything else? No. Okay. So I'm Tim. I'm in Minnesota in the U.S. and have been participating in these calls for over a year. I think, you know, I'm always interested in the process and how to improve it. I know I've heard from a number of other people, and I agree that setting priorities, like how we set priorities. So in addition, that's a process option that will help us reduce waste, possibly, or maybe not, I don't know. But figuring out better ways of helping people, direct people who want to help, but don't have a particular issue to work on, sort of know where best to focus their time. That's a key issue that I am interested in. I want to acknowledge something Jen said about defining initiatives, because I think last week during our dev meeting, we were just sort of brainstorming for this meeting, and this idea of initiatives came up as sort of a process change. And I think that there might be some, I mean, I wasn't convinced that any decision had made to use initiatives, but I'd love to hear what people's feedback, and I think that should be part of our discussion today. And I think sort of the next thing we kind of want to do is talk about not quite as nimble as Jack is here. We wanted to talk about what I had suggested, talking about where people see the pain points are, or what are the problems we're trying to solve in process. And I think a couple have come up, like wastage, better use of people's time is kind of a pain point. The one I brought up is prioritization. Are there other things that people would like to see us, sort of topics, get better at or work on this year to improve our experience in the issue queue and be more effective? Go ahead, Nate.
So yeah, I think it might be helpful to cover our current process real quick.
That would be good.
That's okay. Okay. So our current process for large scale features is usually decided at kind of an annual, or I guess it's one meeting per release, like the meeting that we're having right now. And those present are given a pretty strong influence over what those features will be because they're here in the meeting. And so usually it's just like we just throw out ideas, we write them down as a group of those present. We then say, okay, which one do you think makes sense? And then we say, okay, that sounds good. And then we update the blog, the roadmap page on the website saying these are the objectives for the next release. And they move back and forth. And as the release actually progresses, what ends up happening is we sometimes get some of the things that we said that we were prioritizing, and sometimes we don't. And if we don't, what we do is whatever has gained momentum during the release cycle, if it becomes apparent that those things are likely to be included, then we update the roadmap page, remove the things that aren't getting progress, and add the ones that are getting progress. So the roadmap page is kind of not loose, not really a too much of a planning document, so much as a reactive, like here's what's being worked on document. But at least it's, it's more accurate that way rather than saying something, because we don't have the ability to really make anything be done if there's no enthusiasm or effort behind it. Yeah.
Can you say something about the role of the PMC in setting priorities right now, like theoretically and practically, what it could or should?
So right now, the PMC is, as far as I know, they're not involved in any way regarding the direction of the product for road mapping. Like we have never had.
True.
Have we had any discussions that say like we need to implement this feature and then push that out to the community and say the PMC says we need this?
No, the PMC reviews the list of issues for every next release and votes yes, no, or actually has the opportunity to vote no if they don't like anything. So
And
if
in
with every
practice-
minor release, there's an issue for the PMC to review the feature set.
What Jen has described, I think, to me before is that, like, right now, or at least in the last release cycle or so, is that anybody could nominate or advocate for an issue. And that, again, that list has been forwarded to the PMC, at least to have an opportunity to give feedback, whether they have it or not.
Yeah. And Jack's usually pretty good about commenting on that. Gregory, I think you've commented on a couple of those too, but there are some people in the PMC that don't see them. I think, Nate, you might be one of those people that doesn't see those issues.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be describing this because, I'd completely not seen that.
Yeah.
I thought Nate wasn't on PMC anymore.
Well, the plan is for him to eventually step out, I guess.
Okay, so I thought that had already happened. Okay, that's fine.
We need a replacement. Not for Nate, for Nate's position in the PMC, I guess.
So right prior to this meeting, we had a little bit of a discussion about the PMC and exactly what its role is and some things. And I don't know that we need to have that again, but just to sort of acknowledge that discussion is going on, I think would be good. I think a number of the ideas people have suggested about improving our process involve the PMC in one way or another. And we'll need to work out some of those issues. So is there anything, does anybody else have anything to add about how, not how the process is broken, but how it is working right now? I mean, I think we should acknowledge that, like, one of the things we've adopted recently is this idea of advocates, right? And in a way, that helps set the priority. Like, our milestones are somewhat set by people stepping forward to advocate for issues.
Yeah, I have something generic to add. It's not specifically to features because features usually have a 3-month cycle unless they get pushed further on. But in general, how the issue queue works, and recently there's been voices saying that there's confusion or that it makes it harder for people to sort of like get a focus and get things done because either there's too many opinions or there's no guidance, or what we have, where I work the acceptance criteria of a specific thing that we're working on. So it ends up being a random sort of like brainstorming session in the issue queue, and then people sort of like vote for one thing or the other. It gets something get bike shed dead, I guess, if that's a verb. So some people expressed concern that they would sort of like prefer that there's a clear sort of like spec specified at the beginning of when they start to do the work, and they would prefer to sort of like work in whole chunks. I respect that. Nevertheless, I'm one of those people that I contribute a lot, but I contribute sporadically, so I don't have big chunks of time. Maybe if it seems so, it's because, I mean, it's for me, I work a lot of time. And when I come to contribute, and I would like to voice that, is I want it to be fun. I'm looking for a way out of things. So I'm being project managed where I work. And acceptance criteria is what is my day work. So when I come to Backdrop, I want it to be fun for me. So although I agree that we should get an official plan of how goals and specific issues are being worked on, are being structured, I would still like to leave some room for people like me to just jump whenever we want to have fun and just contribute without being annoying for the rest of the people, that is. One of the points that was mentioned last week was, or the week before that, was that we already were working on an issue and there was a pull request, but I had a different sort of like idea and I filed a pull request. And some people said, oh, this is sort of like disruptive, which pull request are we looking at now? And Nate, you expressed this in the past. It's really bad that GitHub does not offer some sort of collaborative pull request system so that we can sort of like easily coordinate or work together, like more than one developer. So my solution out of that is, and because I'm doing it out of sync, like I'm in a different time zone or whenever I have time, is to just either make a pull request against other people's pull request if I'm sort of like improving what they've worked on, or if I want to suggest something totally different, I just file a separate request. And because we have sandboxes, I think that this gives the opportunity to less technical people that are just doing testing to just have two environments, test one solution, test the other, and say, I like this better about that, and this about the other solution. So yes, that's what I wanted to say.
Go ahead, Nate.
I mean, I also, things in the category of things that are working, I would say that small changes and iterative changes like are happening at an adequate pace. Like the ability for people to say, I don't like this word, or there's a typo here, or fix this doc block. I feel like those changes are, for the most part, like they're being suggested, other people agree, an action happens, a pull request is made, and then it gets merged in, all in relatively short order. Like I'm happy that the barrier for things where everyone is in agreement, like if everyone agrees and the task is simple, like our process seems to work really well, which is nice.
Agree, fully agree.
There's a but to that though, right? Like the alternative, which is the more complicated. Somebody want to say something about that? Jeff, you seem to lean forward.
Yeah, I could also say about that the two people who have spoken so far are also on the PMC. So if they like their bug fix, it just goes. For other people, like, I don't think you'd mind me calling out by name. Doc Wilmot and we're sometimes like, begging for a review, and then we get frustrated. So not to slate the fact that what Nate said, I agree with, like when it's a small bug fix and everybody agrees, it goes through, it's totally fine. But there are also sometimes small bug fixes that bike shed a really lot.
I want to pick up on something you just said. You like tied their membership in the PMC to that, and I don't. Again, to that discussion about the PMC, it's like I don't know that the PMC itself really has a role in making those decisions. The fact that somebody's on the PMC might just give them more clout in the issue queue. But I don't know if that's.
I don't think that this is a fact. So there's no, anyone can do the things that the members that happen to be members of the PMC are doing in the issue queues. It's not that because we say something is going to go in, it goes in. I think that we're doing a very good job at sort of like adhering at the processes. We just wear multiple hats, and this is where my previous comment of saying that the PMC tasks should be more broader. Like decisions on the PMC should not be on specific issues in the queue. That's not.
Yeah, we got to change the language on the PMC page then, because it says they set the direction of the backdrop project. So
Yes.
we need to change that.
As in strategic, yes, I agree. We need to change it. So strategic goals, that's where we jump in and we decide. So if
Yeah,
someone says,
it just needs to be clarified on the public
Yes.
web page.
Greg,
I agree.
I think there's a difference. There's a difference between what it is actually happening and what people's perceptions might be. So you might disagree with people's perceptions and believe them to be completely false. But if they have those perceptions, they have them. And I think that there could be a perception that the PMC is more involved than it is, or that it should be more involved in. That's just something we need to be aware of. Like in
We
this,
might also be facing a situation here where like, we want the PMC to do the things that it says on that page, but they won't. And I think that that's kind of what I was getting to before the meeting started, where like maybe we need to change the PMC so that they are more active, right? Like, so we take the people we know we don't have time who aren't actively contributing and replace them with people who are, and then the PMC can have those roles. And I feel like, we set out the job of the PMC before we had a PMC with like, what do we want the PMC to do? And I don't think we should sacrifice that because it's not happening unless that's what we want, is to have happen what's happening now. I think it might be better to kind of review that holistically and be like, is this what we want the PMC to do? And if it is, then let's just change that and make sure the PMC does it, rather than being like, we're asking you to do these things, but 3 of you haven't been around in 6 months, and it's really hard to like ping you and poke you and email you and try and get you to respond to an issue. Whereas we have people in the community who are active contributors and who are doing all the work and need answers. We need to be a better support structure for them. And so I'd like to be careful about changing the language on the page to reflect what's happening versus changing what's happening to reflect what we want. So that might be something we should consider. Maybe it's halfway in between, right? Like update the page and say, this is what's happening now, and then be like, this is what we want to happen in the next month. And then at least we're both being honest about what's going on and what we're trying to get.
yeah, one thing that I would like to stress is that we already have the process there. When the PMC was formed, it was stating something along the lines of 2 years of service, or maybe at least 2 years of service, I guess. And one of the goals was to have the members of the PMC be a diverse group of people, and to have diversity, you need numbers. So if we are to sort of like remove people, not remove, but not in a bad way, but because they're being inactive, I would like us to make an effort to find replacements. So remove one, add one.
Yeah.
And ideally would be as diverse as possible, because we are a small community, and I know that being diverse when you have most people, for example, being from the US, is not possible. So we're just going to have to live with it. We just have to have more people being constituents for different groups of the community. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's great.
I think the problem that we're describing here that needs to be solved is just a little bit more clarity on what exactly the PMC is doing and what it should be doing in both, and making those two things match more. Is that fair?
Actually, yes. One thing that I would like to mention without disclosing too much information is that one of the tasks for the PMC is to decide for new PMC members, and there's been 2 nominations that for a year now, maybe more, that have not been decided upon.
Well, I think some of those are pending Nate's retirement from the PMC. And that's been for like 3 years or something. So we need to figure out how to move these things forward.
Yep. Let's do this then.
Okay. So that's an issue that's being worked on, and we're not going to solve that issue today here. But it's good to acknowledge. I think I'd like to raise a related issue that I've seen that's related, but I don't want to say it's the same, because I think I've seen recently, and other people have referred to it today, like the worst case of bike shedding that has kind of gotten to a standstill since I've been in the issue queue is happening right now about just kind of a small issue. And I don't know that we have a good process for like, okay, what do we do now? And there's been some suggestions from some people that like, oh, this is where the PMC should jump in. But Gregory, I think, has adequately pointed out that that might not be the level that we of decision that the PMC should be making. But I do think it's fair to say that there should be some way that's commonly understood of like, okay, what do we do now? And my experience has been that those issues just died, right? That they don't get resolved, that they just, everybody moves on to something else and nothing ever happens. And I'd like to see us figure out a better way to break that kind of log jam.
Yeah, and this is where Jen mentioned that we need to find some authority or a person that has some level of authority. So if the problem is a code decision, it needs to be one of the core committers with experience in coding. If it is a UX, UI issue, it should be a person that has, ideally would be a professional in the field. That's what I'm saying. So yeah. Okay. Or if it's a design issue, a designer to that point.
So what if bike shedding is happening between professional designers in the issue queue? Then how do you bring in a third one to break the tie or what?
Well, I think that's why we were going to have like someone who was officially like Backdrop's design authority. And so if you have like 3 professional designers, but one of them is the design authority, that's the person who has the final say. And so this would become like another section on our leadership page where we'd be like, this is our design authority and this is our, you know, code tiebreaker or whatever we want to end up calling these people. It should be noted somewhere, and maybe even some like how to reach them, like ping on Gitter versus email versus whatever, and have some kind of method for we're having a conflict, we need your opinion, and get them to weigh in. And that person needs to be willing to do that, right? Like we wouldn't want to pick like Wes if he was on vacation in Bermuda and be like, we need a decision, he's not around. So just having somebody who is both willing and has the authority to make an executive call.
Yes, so I agree with that. But having said that, if there's disagreement, they would have to present arguments. It's not just, this is my opinion. They would have to say because of that, because of this and that. Like,
yeah. And I think that sort of would go with like accepting that responsibility, is understanding how to explain your decision in the queue.
So the last thing that I would like us to do is have certain aspects of the, I know that this is impossible to avoid to 100% thing, but I would like us to avoid as much as possible having opinionated things introduced in the product. It shouldn't be an opinion. It should be a sort of like an educated, researched decision.
Yeah, that's hard when it comes to things like design.
I know.
But
as much as possible. That's why I said as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
So if there's user studies, if there's things that to back up certain things, yes. But if it's controversial by nature, like even in the broader like internet thing, then I think that we have like at some point to just make a decision. I don't know how that would be. Maybe that's the point where the PMC steps in.
Well, let's get to that in just a minute, because I think people want to talk about solutions, and I do too, and I think we can get there. The big issues that I'm hearing right now are how do we set priorities? Who's responsible to break log jams? How improving that process? So better communicating whose role is what, and maybe having people that are able to break log jams or do certain things. That there might be some gaps in our process that need to be filled. Priorities. What else have we already done? And are there other different issues that we haven't addressed yet that we want to add to the list? And then let's jump to solutions.
I would like us to be a considerate community as a whole. So I generally don't want us to be getting in the way of each other. Mm-hmm. So if there's people that think that a more structured process driven sort of like workflow of developing is the way to do things, I would like to have the people like myself who are coming to Backdrop to contribute as a form of pastime or having fun and enjoying it, not get in the way of that, and the other way around as well. So yeah.
So just to be inclusive of different sort of styles of working and different motivators.
Yeah, but at the same time, but at the same time, if it becomes a problem, a real problem for people, I don't want that to happen. Like I don't want a structured way of a structured workflow of getting things done to get in the way of people that are having fun to stop having fun, and I don't want people that are having fun to stop the way of people that are having a more structured sort of like workflow of doing things to just feel frustrated about things not getting done. I don't have the solution for it.
Right. It occurred to me the other problem that we started out with was not wasting work effort, like being efficient in how we use people's time and resources. So sort of before we move on to solutions, is it one last chance? Is there other sort of problems that we're trying to solve with these solutions that stand out for anybody?
I'd like to really, sorry, do you want to go ahead, Nate?
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I would really like to find a way to reduce burnout. And I think, especially, being good with people's time is important, but also helping people get through the issue queue conflicts and just the process, and anything that we find is adding like more barriers between I want to help and I feel good about helping. And if it's, I've tried 4 times to re-roll this pull request and I can't figure out the system, or there's this person who I don't agree with on opinion, or I don't know how to get my feature to be approved by the people who are making decisions about what goes into core. I would love to sort of focus on trying to make it feel better to contribute.
Sure. Related. Oh, Nate, you were next. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is a legitimate concern, but these meetings that we have, the people that show up to them have an outsized influence, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It provides it like an equal opportunity currently for pretty much anyone in the community to have a FaceTime with people that can actually solve most of the problems, right? I mean, we've got usually several PMC members on these calls. We've got several core committers on these calls. So whether that's good that we're trying to make ourselves accessible to anyone in the community, or if these calls end up making it so that people that aren't more socially inclined, people that are restricted by their time zone or geography, like are being excluded from this process. And so I think that maybe that's one of the issues that we have with our current way of deciding major features like we do it in this meeting. And if we can find a way that works asynchronously or is more equal opportunity, that would be great.
Although this is a valid concern, I like to trust that the current members of the PMC are responsible enough to just sort of like try to, because we're all human, all right? I'm not saying that this is done to 100%, is to leave their personal opinions on the side. That's what I try to do. And we have all sort of like been nominated as constituents of a specific part of the community, as in multilingual group or non-coders or UX or developers. And I think that for the most part, we're doing a really good job at not being, like I've numerous times sort of like expressed the opinion of other people's people that are side builders, where it contradicts with my opinion, my personal opinion. And I think that if we make a better job or keep doing the good job that we're doing as PMC members to be impartial and keep our personal opinions separate, then this will work. It's the moment where PMC members may be abusing their position to sort of like steer to one direction or another, where things become dangerous. This has not been the case. That's my understanding. That's my take. But it's the job of the rest of the members of the PMC, if that happens, to sort of like point it out and just like work it out between ourselves. And I think we're sort of like very people, all of us, and it's like we're doing a good job. I don't think that anyone has been abusing their power.
Right now, what we're trying to do is define the problems people want us to talk about. So I wanted to just mention another one quick, which is, I think in terms of processes, doing a better job of maybe recruiting or improving or increasing our contributor base. A number of the problems that we're talking about are directly related to the number of people that we have working on the project. And this is related to Jen's about retaining members, but also getting new ones, getting new people contributing and helping onboard new users. I think that's something else to be addressed. Should we move on to some of the ideas that we have to address these problems? And maybe, well, let me do a check here. We started this meeting at about a quarter after, I think. So should we shoot for 4:15 is the end time? Is that agreed? Kind of looking at, anybody object to that?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, it works.
Let's shoot for that as the end time of the meeting. And maybe for efficiency's sake, well, no, let me just let people present their own ideas if they want. I was going to suggest that maybe I threw out some things that I'd seen in the forum, but rather than me doing that, the goal right now is for people to say, here are some things that they'd like to see us try that will solve one of these problems that we've talked about, and not to get into a debate about whether or not that's the right solution or the best solution, but just to get a number of solutions out on the table. And then we can talk about them deeper after that. Anyone want to start?
Before we go to that, I know that some people like to work with time constraints, and it's good that you brought up that when is the limit, but we don't have to limit the decisions or what was expected out of this meeting to this meeting. We can set the foundation now and then do it for the next meeting. So just let's not worry, let's do a good job. Let's not worry about time. Yeah.
I don't mean that's the end of the discussion, only the end of today's.
Yes, agreed, fully agreed. Should we do the, like one thing that has been brought up recently was initiatives.
Sure.
Should we discuss about that? Yeah. So I'm not, so Drupal has initiatives as well. They call them strategic initiatives. And it's usually 4 or 5 or 6 of them. It's just very, very broad goals for the entire year or for the next version, the next release. I'm not sure if we want to have it work for Backdrop the exact same way, or we want to sort of like adapt it because we are a smaller community and have more frequent releases or what have you. But the way that I see initiatives being is that if we had the advocating thing be towards specific features, I would like to see the initiatives be specific metas, as in we have a meta initiative about better multilingual. We have an initiative of being improving UX or getting cross-ported fixes from D7. So we should define a few of those initiatives, decide what capacity or threshold we have, given how many people we can assign to those initiatives as leads. And then if they're not, or if they do not already exist, like create meta issues for it, and then work our way from there. But the general sort of like idea would be that initiatives are broader sort of like goals. They have a person which is leading it and who are willing to either physically be present during our meetings and sort of like summarize progress, or be willing to add progress to the meta issues that we have for them. And I think that initiative should be something that is decided by the PMC, like which initiative we work on. Yeah.
Jen, do you have anything to add? You were interested in talking about initiatives. Is there any thing to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious about like how we can better drive Backdrop towards its goals. And I feel like what we've been doing for the last few releases has been like, oh, here's a thing we need to fix. But it's been very focused on like an issue or something that I think that, was missing from Drupal 7, which makes sense. But long-term, it would be good to be like, what are our priorities? And if our priority is something big, like making Backdrop translatable, then it would be good to have a topic that spans multiple releases rather than being one issue we work on until the release is done and then it's over, and then another one, the next release, and it's over. But something that's like, what can we do this release to make translation better? And what can we do next release to make translation better? So something that's not just for one feature release. but something that will continue to move us closer towards that goal with every release. And so that's what I'm most interested in figuring out, is how we can continue to drive the product towards our desired goals rather than just working on desired features for every release.
Yeah, I think that we already sort of like, maybe we haven't worded or phrased it as like out, but the advocacy that we have for specific issues works for its release. The initiatives should either be for the entire year or do not have time boundaries. It
Yeah.
could be ongoing. So I think that's not a problem. It's maybe just specifying, because we're trying to sort of like understand how initiatives would work and what they would be, what form they would have. But yes, you're right. It shouldn't be limited to one release. We would say that it's a strategic goal for Backdrop to be an easier product to use. Then that should be ongoing. It may not be limited to 1 year. And what that means in my head is that if we have certain candidate features to be advocated for the next release, if the general goal is to improve the user experience, and we sort of like need to choose between two of the possible candidate features, then we pick the one that is improving the UX. And I think that in my head, I feel that this would work.
I also think, though, that it might be good, like if we had a set of 5 initiatives or something in these meetings immediately after a release, where we're trying to decide what we're going to do in the next release, we can be like, okay, so what are we doing for usability in the next release? What are we doing for translation in the next release? What are we doing, whatever? And it'll help, rather than being like, oh, we really need this new feature that everybody thinks is going to be great, but maybe doesn't align with our goals. It'll help us kind of keep truer to all of the things that we think are most important getting attention in every release. And maybe not every release, like maybe you skip one and say, well, we don't have any issues that are urgent enough that we need this release. But then the next release, we still review that list and say, okay, next release, what are we doing for translation or usability or whatever it is? And I think that that'll help us keep on track more.
Can I ask if anybody that hasn't contributed to the initiative discussion yet has any questions or things they'd like to add about initiatives? No?
I'd like to ask about on the leadership page. It says that sentence about the direction of Backdrop is guided by the PMC. Is there somewhere where the direction is stated?
It's our basically it's our what do you call this?
Principles.
My English failed me.
There's 2 pages. There's the roadmap, which is only really stating what's going on in the next release. And then there's our philosophy. And I think that Backdrop sets, or Backdrop PMC, the philosophy is set by the PMC, but we're not doing a good enough job in every release to making sure that Backdrop is moving closer towards what's stated in the philosophy. And I think if we had initiatives that might help that a little bit, and so it would make sure that the people who are doing the work are doing what the PMC has said the goals of the project are. So that I think it's
the initiatives are kind of like more formal. How are we heading toward the things stated in our philosophy?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Right.
Yeah, and also initiatives don't have to be tied to the product or specific releases. It could be community initiatives. So this is how initiatives at least work in Drupal. It might be the initiative for more inclusiveness or reaching out to people, or and it's twofold. Like it's also to allow people that are not coders or do not want to get involved with the actual process of adding features or feature bags to sort of like contribute to the community. It could be documentation. It could be, as I said, organizing events and doing reach out. It could be,
Which of the problems that we identified are initiatives addressing, which are trying to solve?
Yeah.
I'm thinking one of them is prioritizing, right? It's helping us prioritize where we put at least some of our efforts. Is it helping us solve any of the other ones?
Yeah, for example, Jeff and Doc Wilmot have, I don't want to put people on the spot, have expressed that they have strong opinions about prioritization. Maybe they could be the co-leads of the prioritization initiative.
Okay.
Maybe we have like 5 or 10 issues that are being worked actively at a given time, and they are sort of like the gatekeepers of that or something like that. Just a random idea. Yeah.
Initiatives might help with burnout, or they might contribute to it. I don't know, but that's something to think about too.
I think something on that, when you define that, which relates to both what Tim and Greg have both said, is that somebody who becomes an initiative lead needs to have the authority to do what they're going to do. Otherwise, they're going to get to the end and basically say, we're not going to do that. So I think when defining what the initiative is, you need to consider what these people are allowed to do and make sure that those people are aware of that before they even start. So they say, well, if I'm not allowed to commit core code, then I'm not being an initiative lead. Just for an example. I think that's important. I mean, I think these people need to understand where their limits are, what their responsibilities are, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, those sorts of things.
And that's solving the problem that we identified before about making decisions, right?
Right. And it also, like, it takes the I'm not sure what the correct word is, the power, the ability to get stuff done, and spreads it out more so that there's not so few people doing it. More people can be more involved in getting stuff done, especially in broader things, I think.
Right. So I'd like, we got about a little over 15 minutes left in this stage of the conversation, to bring in some of the other ideas that I think they overlap with the initiatives. Jeff, would you be willing to chat a little bit about the idea you posted today?
Yeah, the basic idea of it is to separate the initial issue queue from the dev issue queue, so that people can think about an idea and say whatever they want. Anybody can say whatever they want about the idea. I think this should be a drop down. I think this should be pink, whatever. And then once a consensus is made, move it to an actual dev issue queue with an original post that says, this has been fleshed out, it's decided upon, this is what we want. We want to change the behavior on this page to do these things. And those could be big things or small things. The kind of roadblock there is who decides when a thing is fleshed out and done from the initial proposal queue. And I guess a lot of us were thinking that was PMC, but maybe that could be initiative leads. That's the outline of the idea along the lines that I was thinking of.
Although I want to clarify, Jeff, with you, that I think, like Gregory's concern would be, you're not suggesting that you can't write pull requests, or you can't try to solve problems in that initial issue, right?
Absolutely, you can still write a pull request against that queue, just as we do now. The understanding would be that if you're writing a pull request against that queue, you're writing a pull request against the moving target, and then that your work might be, wasted or lost, however the individual perceives it. But if you're willing to do that, and sometimes that's the best thing to do, to give people a sandbox and to experience that thing, to make a decision about which thing is the best thing. And then if a consensus is made and there's already code behind it, it's probably just a matter of committing it. But if there's a thing that was large enough where it was discussed and it had 50 comments, and then we finally came to a thing about here's the implementation plan, then we open an issue in a dev queue that a developer knows they can sink their teeth into.
So the way I'm understanding your proposal is that there'd be the opportunity for either, if an issue got bogged down, for us to say, let's pause this and have somebody make a decision about what the spec should be, instead of just having competing ideas, and maybe move that into this official queue. Or if this would also apply to more complicated problems where a developer isn't really motivated to write a pull request if they don't know that there's some kind of consensus. And it sort of allows the opportunity to get some consensus, or to talk about what people want before they write a pull request, and then settle on that, right? So we've decided we want X. Now let's start on the pull request, as opposed to writing one and then having somebody step in and say, oh no, that's not what we want after all.
Yeah, it's to me, it speaks to the different kinds of contributors that we have in the community. We've expressed that there are different kinds of contributors, and we need all kinds of contributors for sure. But for the developer-minded contributors, that the way they want to contribute is by code, they're going to want to see a commit too. Or, in my experience, if they don't see that, especially if they're a first timer, they're probably going to leave the community. We could have a nice queue of things that are decided that are ready to work on. Though I think the way Tim said it was put a PMC stamp on it, tag on it, something like that. And then those sort of college students or first time open source contributors can see that this is a thing that presumably won't be a waste of their time.
Jeff, in that process in your head, how would, if someone comes late to the party and they want to contribute an idea, how would that work? Do we block that from ever reaching this dev queue? We keep on banging until we commit the code of what was decided, and then we act upon the idea that the person has suggested, as in a fix on that? Because
if a consensus has been reached and it's been moved to the dev queue, then a developer that works on it should be able to get it committed. And then if it needs iteration in the future, that's totally fine. That's just you start the process again with a new issue in the original queue.
This is really helpful because my head is not like that. It's not in a place like that. I work in a very iterative way. I expect feedback from others, and when they say, "Oh, we changed our mind, change whatever you just wrote," I just do it.
Yeah.
So there's a consensus, but I understand that there's other people that do not sort of like work that way. They cannot, like it's not fun for them to work that way.
It would be good if we could figure out a way to do this without needing 2 queues, just to decrease the overhead on all of the people who are currently working on stuff. Like the possibility of like for things getting lost in one place or filed in the wrong place or whatever just seems like it might cause more harm than good. But if there was a way that we could do this exact same process with the tools that we have now, with some sort of like labeling or assignments, or I don't know, GitHub's not great with categorization, but some way that we could keep it all in the same place and be able to move something from like discussion to action or code, and even that way to go backwards. Like if we try something and then we're like, oh, we changed our minds, push it back to the first queue without it having to actually be managed in a separate physical GitHub queue.
As it is now, we don't, like, not everyone has permission to edit the initial, the first.
Right.
Like,
the parent.
Sorry?
Oh.
The original post.
The original post. I think that there's only a few people that have access to do that.
What?
Yeah, I think. I'm not sure. We have to see it. Because I've seen people asking, can someone change the labels? Can someone please update the initial post? How about if we agree that the developers just look at the first post and that's where the acceptance criteria is, but we still allow discussion? That discussion does not necessarily need to affect what the work that the developer is doing.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's so much good conversation that happens in the queue that if you only look at the first post, you're going to miss everything. That happens a lot now, where it's like, oh, by the time it gets to the bottom of the issue, it's a totally different feature than it was in the first one, and that doesn't get updated enough. I think we should just fix the issue where people don't have access. I mean, that's unrelated. Maybe we should do that anyway. Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to be that way. I think that's the same bug, like the same bug that doesn't let people edit labels is probably what's also not letting them edit the first post.
We might need an initiative to improve the process. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Don't you need like a particular permission to edit the labels and stuff?
Yeah, everybody should have it. Everybody should have all permissions on the issues repo. As soon as you add a comment, there's a bot that's supposed to grant you all permissions, but it hasn't been working for a while.
Yes, that might be dangerous. That.
Why?
I don't know, malicious people or bots creating accounts and then messing up with all the tags that we have. It should be a member of the community that we trust, or a person that has not been in GitHub for like 2 seconds.
We're running.
We could do some kind of limit. I don't think that we should put a human on that. That seems like a.
Yes, sure.
But I do think having some limitations, like not a freshly created user, would be good.
Yep. We are scheduled time. We've got about 5 minutes. I have like a completely different solution to some of these problems that I'd like to just throw on the table. We won't have time to talk about, which is just better volunteer management. And this addresses recruitment and the burnout issue, I think, is I feel like we could do better as a community of sort of tracking like who our contributors are. Well, and I'd like opinions on this, on if people think this is a good idea, not necessarily opinions today because of our time, but to do a better job at tracking who our volunteers are, sort of staying in touch with them, and having somebody that's like a volunteer coordinator would be great. That could, you know, when somebody gets into the issue queue and seems really active for a week and then we don't hear from them anymore, sometimes I think it's not bad to reach out to them and just say, hey, are you okay? Was there something we could do or not? Anyways, that's something I'd like to think about and set as a goal. I often think that my skills would be better put to use in like volunteer management than they are in writing pull requests. There are other people that are much better at that than me, but we don't really have a system in place to do that, volunteer management, and sometimes I'm not sure what to do.
I think that would be amazing, and we should figure out how we can build a system to help people like you do that.
And I think the Civi CRM is a step in that direction.
Yeah.
And are there other?
Yeah. Although it is manual, I'll try, because I've had a recent case in last week, where there's a new person that maybe I've seen his name around. He's Greek as well. That's why I pointed it out. That offered to do a pull request, and he's never come back to the issue queue in like a few days. Maybe just poking them and saying, "Hey, did you manage to get that?" So this is what you try to do, right? That's my understanding.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm not sure how we can sort of like add GitHub into that queue and automate it at the same time. I can't think of anything right now, but
it might be possible to use the API to generate a list that's like, these are all of the people in the last time they commented on stuff. And if we could just review that like once a week or once every few days, that might be enough. Yeah, but I don't know what the API can do. So
yeah, because what we end up doing now is like people like Peter just go through the queue with old issues, and like we haven't responded to some people like in a year or two or even more, and we just say, oh, this is obsolete now. Okay. So that's sort of like a lost opportunity to have an active member of the community. I mean, most of the cases is that we go back and say, oh, this has been fixed. And the person might say, yeah, great, but it's been 3 years later. So
does anybody else have any other, in the last minutes of this call, what I'd like to do quickly is give anybody a chance to bring up any ideas that might have been in the forum or in your mind that we haven't talked about yet today, and just get them on our list. And then two, to quickly decide what our next steps are. So does any other ideas that are separate from the ones we've talked about and how we can better fix these problems?
I'm not sure if you guys have tried anything equivalent to what would be the Google Summer of Code, like grabbing people that are graduating from, yes. So this does sound like something that should have been discussed in the previous meeting, but because it's closely related to coding, yeah.
I think it could be either.
Yeah, or both, yeah.
Because I actually, Gregory, I was thinking, I've been thinking about the same thing, which is whether or not as a community, like we could do something. One of our problems is prioritizing, right, what's important for the product. And one of the problems we have in prioritizing is that people, as volunteers, we scratch the itch that engages us the most. And some of the most important problems are the most difficult ones, and nobody's motivated to do those. And this might be the case where, like a summer of code or working with some sort of an intern or a training program, we could actually like engage people on difficult problems because they're trying to learn and they have a different set of motivations. I don't know.
I think that creating more monsters like me is a good thing. So I was one of those annoying people that was hanging around in the Drupal queue and then in the Backdrop queue, and I was sort of like brainstorming and throwing ideas here and there. And it was Jeff that jumped in and said, you know that you can file a pull request, right? So I'm not sure if we can grab more people like that, because that's what started me. And it's been thrilling for me. Like, it's been very rewarding to be able to just fix the tiny things here and there so that others do not have to worry about those. And it's the tiny fixes here and there that make eventually a better product. So if we can get more people that are, willing to do the tiny bits here and there, documentation, help text, like policing here and there, it would eventually sort of like make a good product, and it won't be a high barrier for them to enter. It's just fixing tiny things.
Anything else? Anything else people want to get on the list of things that we should be at least thinking about for solving these problems? I think we should go back through the forum and see if there were any other good ideas there that we want to talk about. But why don't we then take a couple extra minutes, if everybody's okay, just decide what's next. Like this idea of initiative seems to be getting some momentum here. It seems to me that before it could be implemented, one, it has to be fleshed out a little bit more. And two, I would assume that the PMC would have, this is the kind of thing that they would weigh in on, right? That they would kind of like, at least decide, agree to that.
Okay.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, I don't think that this is the meeting that we come up with every solution and we do everything. This is the groundwork. So if we have the bullet points for the next meeting, one bullet point could be clearly sort of like define what initiative is and processes. That's it. And we can discuss that in the next meeting. Like we had very good ideas and there's a recording of them as we speak. So if we can make bullet points of that and try in the next dev meeting that we have to sort of like flesh out what an initiative is, formulate, like a good start is like start a unpublished page in b.org, because that's where it will end up saying initiatives. And then maybe creating a content type called initiative so that we can sort of like list them. Because eventually these will need to be announced to the public.
Is a dev meeting where this discussion has to take place, or at what point does this go to the PMC?
Well, it needs to happen to one of the meetings. It doesn't feel like a design or outreach topic.
No, but it could be a PMC meeting. It might not be.
Okay, yeah. So I wouldn't like to limit though the brainstorming on what initiatives should look like to only PMC members. So if we can make a separate meeting for that, yes, I'm all for it.
So your point is that it needs to be fleshed out more before it went to the PMC. That makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, maybe create an issue in the queue and then have all the ideas there, and then realize that as a sort of like a landing page or something. I don't know.
How come you guys can have fleshed out ideas in your queue, but we can't? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding you.
That was your cue.
So there's a couple of the ideas, like this idea of doing better volunteer outreach, which I don't know that needs to be. Some people can talk about that. We can do some things. We don't have to put that on the agenda for a future dev meeting, I don't think. But ideas like the initiatives, I think this idea of Jeff's about how triaging the issue queue and being more proactive, these are things that are going to need more discussion. And I'm kind of, Nate, what is your feeling about, like, how much is this, should we be spending more dev meeting time on that? Or should these be a subcommittee like go off and flesh these out?
I think using the dev meeting is a valid way to proceed. The dev meetings tend to be a little bit rote, you know, like we do the same thing over and over again. And if we want to take more than just this meeting and continue kind of doing some of these investigations, then great, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this should be established like every beginning of each year. Like we should dedicate a couple of meetings, as many as it takes, to sort of like better organize the direction and the initiatives that sort of like, yeah, will make us sort of like work better together.
I agree, but I want to add one thing that we haven't talked about since we started doing all these planning meetings, and that's that we need to push the release of 1.5. And we've been skipping doing our actual like weekly work to talk about big picture stuff, but we're now really late on getting that out. So it doesn't look like we have any critical bugs in it. Can we just push 1.5.0?
You mean 1.15?
Yeah. Sorry, 1.15.0. To where it needs to be, so that we can like send the newsletter and all that stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, Nate, I pinged you twice about the tugboat, and I have a pull request. Just saying.
Tugboat's updated.
Okay.
I did.
Cool.
I did it a few days ago.
Okay.
What
Sorry.
about Pantheon?
not done Pantheon.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think like before we can make a bunch of noise about all of the great features we just released, which I'd love to do, we need to release the features to everybody who can get them. So like I just scheduled a bunch of Facebook posts and then I was like, oh wait, we can't actually post about these because if these people try it on Pantheon, they won't see the new features. So I don't know if we should set a timeline for that, like maybe next week or something. We can choose a date. So what is it today? Today's the 6th.
I mean, it's been we've had the 2 weeks, since the release.
Yeah, more than that.
There hasn't been any issues that are of note, I don't think. So normally we would have made 115.1 if there wasn't any issues, but there haven't been any substantial issues that have been raised. Yeah.
Okay, so can we push it soon? Like this week?
Quickly, weren't there some RTF right to left issues that were brought up, and did they get resolved? I saw a couple of GitHub posts from people. Somebody said that some RTF issues were broken by 1.1.
RTL.
RTL, yes.
RTL. I don't know if they were confirmed. I don't know if they got fixed.
Yeah, it wasn't my to-do list and I didn't take a look, but that person has been very diligent with reporting these things. So I take it for granted that they are problems that do exist. So yeah, needs to be reproduced.
It doesn't look like there's pull requests on any of those issues.
Yes, unfortunately. So there was no time to do anything.
Yeah.
Nick, to the extent of updating other things, like maybe Tagboat is something that I can take from you. I mean, it's a low sort of like impacting if anything breaks, like we had it not working for a day, and the worst that can happen is that it's broken for 24 hours and then I fix it or I revert it. So maybe that can go off of your plate so that we can sort of like, it's not the live site that it gets broken, like the backdrop.org site.
Yep.
It's the ability of people to sprint demos. So maybe that can go off of your list.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to document how that works so that other people can do it.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest for follow-up that these two big ideas, the initiatives, which I think there seems to be a lot of interest in, although not a firm consensus yet, and Jeff's idea, which there might be less consensus in, but at least interest in, that we keep talking about those as portions of the next 1 or 2 dev meetings, but also try to get our other business done. Like we don't have to commit the entire meeting next week to this, but at least further this discussion and move towards a decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. With only one thing, that it's not that there's not consensus for Jeff's thing. It's just we need to sort of like find how that will work. There is consensus. So we should make it less frustrating for people that are more organized and dev oriented to just make it fun for them to contribute and less frustrating.
I think all I meant is that there's been less opportunity for people to sort of voice their opinion on that one yet. But
yeah, sure. I think that these are two good bullet points for the next dev meeting.
Okay. Anything else? Should we call? Is that it for the meeting? Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tim, for running things. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.